welcome to this fourth program on philanthropy. The first one was about an introduction to philanthropy historically in terms of its ideas. The second one was about charitable giving, and particularly family philanthropy. The third one was about family foundations. And this fourth one, we're going to talk about the current paradigm shift in philanthropy. And for this, we are rejoined by John Sugden, who is a longtime Dover resident, very active in the fire department, a civically engaged citizen, active in philanthropy, but whose business background at State Street Bank provided a platform for a career shift into philanthropy. John is now Senior Director of Public Relations for the Shriners Hospital Organization, and we're glad to have you, John. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. George, everyone knows that we're living in a period of rapid change given the technology that we're dealing with today, the globalization of economies. A lot of change is going on as a result of that. And I have to believe that that's affected philanthropy as well. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, just how has that affected philanthropy, and where do you think we're going here, given all of these changes in technology?
Well, my training is in history, and it's important to realize, everybody knows that everything is changing in philanthropy. It's very commonly remarked. It helps to understand that this is a particular kind of change that's happening not only to philanthropy, but in every industry that the internet touches. And to understand that as a paradigm shift gives us huge analytical power to understand how it's happening, to observe what's happening, to sort out what's going to be permanent from what's going to be ephemeral, and to build toward the future. So let me explain briefly what a paradigm shift is. The term comes from the history of science. The paradigm is the governing model in any mature field of endeavor. In science, there's general agreement almost all the time on what appropriate instruments are, what the terms are, what a problem is, what kinds of answers to the problem are acceptable. And there's general agreement on the basics, and what they're doing is testing the outer implications of the current paradigm. And that's true in every mature field. Philanthropy became paradigmatic in the 20th century when it was dominated by the very large national foundations created by unprecedented wealth of the Rockefellers and the Fords and the Mellons and the Lillys and all of those folks. Now, when a paradigm includes technology, instrumentation in science, it includes terminology, it includes an economics that supports the field, it directs what kind of training prepare people for activity within the field. It's virtually how everything associated with that field fits together into a governing model. Now, paradigms order a field for a certain period of time, but then from time to time in any field, the old paradigms begin to become less satisfactory. They cease to solve problems as effectively as they did. There can be new developments in the environment that impose on a field a change. That's what we're seeing today with computers and technology. The economy of the field can change. The environment can change. And in those cases, the ground begins to shift underneath the established institutions and leaders in the field, and they have to begin adapting to a system that is now in flux. Old institutions, less successful, decline. New institutions, innovations are everywhere, and some of them will last, some of them won't. But people have to try to invent the new future. And gradually, as that happens, certain of those innovations begin to come together and work together and become mutually reinforcing. And they solve the problems that could not be solved under the old paradigm. And when they do that, they comprise a new paradigm. Now, during the paradigm shift, because changes are fundamental and everywhere, you can't foresee the result. You can only see it as things begin to come together. Philanthropy right now is in that place where everything's changing. There are innovations all around us. We don't know where we're going. We know where we've been. And everybody is trying to figure out what the future is. I first noticed this in 2000, wrote some articles about it. I've written about it since then. And it's fascinating to watch everybody try to adjust to this rapidly changing environment. So, technology, in this case, is especially powerful. It's computers and the internet, and that technology is itself rapidly evolving. So that the transition, for example, to handheld mobile devices away from personal computers on tabletops has major implications for fundraising, for example. But John, can you give us some examples? Do you see innovations happening around you?
Well, I think there's a lot going on in the way of education for people to understand how they can engage philanthropy more readily. And I guess the question really for you, George, is how do you see some of these large technology machines like a GuideStar and Charity Navigator, how do you see them fitting into this new technology model?
It's very interesting. GuideStar was started in the 90s by a friend of mine, Buzz Schmidt. It was an attempt to give donors financial data about charities so they could make better investments. And Buzz set up this system where they could download the nation's personal income tax returns or summaries thereof from the IRS and put up on the web, which was at that point new, the 990s of every charity in the country. 990s are by law public documents. So he was going to make those really public by making them universally accessible on the net. Now, that's an example of a national institution which is operating for the whole country, and they have, which is kind of an old paradigm model, and they have tried to elaborate that model and become self-supporting, and there are difficulties about that. Charity Navigator is the same kind of model, and it was acquired by GuideStar a couple years ago. Charity Navigator wanted to help donors evaluate charities, and they were going to do it principally by analysis of financials and other things. And they, again, are a national institution from the top down trying to order philanthropy. Now, that's old paradigm. So both of those institutions, which are huge now, are not really succeeding in gaining their own self-support as a business model. They're having difficulty with the technology, computers, and the internet, which is intrinsically decentralizing. And so they're kind of between the old paradigm and the new paradigm.
So how do we reach new donors and foster more charitable giving?
It's a good question. First, the demographics of wealth have changed in the paradigm shift, and that's also been a driving consideration. With new high technology industries that are global, enormous new wealth has been created. And the people who are the wealth creators are generally younger. They've made a pile of money, much more than they ever expected to, and they're asking themselves, well, what's next? They want to teach their kids values. Their children are millionaires already. They are in their 30s and 40s, still parenting. So they are, in large number, conspicuously entering full-time philanthropy, and they bring to it their business skills, the way they got their startups going, venture capital models. And so the new donors are now exerting pressure on philanthropy that changes the vocabulary. In the old days, they talked about giving away and giving back to the third sector at the end of your life. People were spent their whole lives building their fortune, and then they would get into philanthropy with a foundation or something like that. Now it's happening to people who are much younger, and they have made philanthropy kind of chic. So the number of donors, the size of resources that they're bringing, the foundations that they're creating are huge. In the 20th century, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation were the biggest foundations in the country. Right now, they're about 17th. The Gates Foundation is the largest foundation in the world, of course, and it's going to get even larger, much larger. So the whole landscape now is changing. The new donors are also very interested in high-risk, high-gain investments. Old donors used to invest in old established national institutions. The new donors are much more adventurous, making larger gifts in smaller number and trying to really change the world.
Mm-hmm. So I know that you spend your time from a strategic perspective engaged in philanthropy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering where you see us going from here. I know that I've seen some changes myself at Shriners Hospitals for Children over the years. This is an organization that ranks as the 42nd largest charity in the United States, ranked last year, and part of the Masonic fraternity. And it's interesting that historically most of our endowment has come from members of the fraternity. We also make the observation that the Masonic fraternity, where I had spent time chairing a development committee for several years, most of the endowment for that philanthropy came to philanthropy pre-1964.
Really? Wow.
So the patterns of giving have changed.
That's right.
And I'm just wondering, for a Shriners and the Masonic fraternity, Shriners needing a large endowment to run 22 hospitals, it's a philanthropic, pediatric, specialized surgical care hospital, we had some challenges. We had gone from telling the public that we had an endowment that would care for the expenses in this organization, with the cost of health care increasing and endowments shrinking. That was no longer the case. So here we have some challenges going forward. What would you recommend going forward for an organization?
Well, Shriners, it sounds to me, my father was a Mason, and he was a Shriner. They were a kind of a leading example of the old paradigm model of charity development, creating a large national network which would support major philanthropy, in this case, care for children with burns, I guess. That's how they started.
Primarily in Boston.
And and their donors were generally elderly people already. And they were extremely successful. That's why they're so large. Now, in a new environment, I think you'd have to look at membership recruitment. Are younger people coming into Shriners and the Masons in the same numbers, or is that an issue as well? I suspect it is.
It is an issue where young people are not joining fraternal
And
organizations.
I have seen
as
on
they
television,
used to.
I think we all have, advertisements promoting the Masonic
Which has helped some of the
fellowship.
membership, but
Yeah.
we are still a shrinking population, both the
Yeah.
Masons and the Shriners.
So, now my son, I was seriously considered. I don't know if he did become a Mason or not, but he was seriously considering it, so that would be a counterexample. But I think what that means is that you're going to have to reach out beyond the membership to the country at large to address a younger audience, for which you have the advantage of being concerned with children. Since many of the people entering philanthropy are still parenting, their favorite fields of philanthropy are children, and particularly disadvantaged children, and childhood education to even the playing field so that other people get the advantages they have. So I think that's a hospitable audience for this. Now, raising money from a general public of younger people who do not read newspapers and they don't watch television. They're getting everything from the internet and on handheld devices. And so the latest thing in the field is trying to figure out how charities can put their messages onto handheld devices and get people to come to their websites. We have created here in Massachusetts a system which internet-based, which will contain all the charities of Massachusetts organized in 200 fields, systematically from 3 fields: nature, culture, human services. And human services divided according to life needs, so food, clothing, shelter, health, safety, employment, etc. Now, if we can get an app so that people, and I know nothing about this, but if we could get an app, philanthropy, mass philanthropy, so that people could go to one place and find opportunities to give according to their interests, that might be a big help. But that's one of the unsolved questions of this paradigm shift. What will work and what's not? There have been some so-called crowdsourcing giving, where people can put up a laundry list of things you can help, and anybody who wants to can subscribe and support it, and they've raised huge money doing that. Now, I think probably the people who are advising you should not be as old as I am. They should be young people who are in their 20s and used to this new milieu.
Well, I like the idea of people being able to see, in technical terms, a taxonomy of philanthropy, a tree with all the branches branching out to show all of those areas of philanthropy categorized in ways that make sense.
Yeah.
But I think there's certainly a lot of people that have an appetite for specific philanthropy. And
one of the flaws of the old paradigm, which nobody was aware of until the internet came along and made it possible, was that there was no way for a person who wanted to get into philanthropy to do it. Philanthropy as a whole was not helping people get into philanthropy as a whole. It was all individual charities selling themselves. And as a result, when we get to the internet, suddenly, with that new technology, a whole new world opens up where you can create in cyberspace a virtual philanthropic community that's open and visible and accessible to everyone in the whole world. So we have 200 fields of philanthropy, all organized, and anybody on Earth can find their niche if we can get the system extended state by state, nationwide, and worldwide. It'll unify and strengthen the culture of philanthropy in this country.
I think there's a great appetite for philanthropy. I think, again, your model and your system to get people there is wonderful and will work. But I think also educating people as to how they can give and some of the tools and vehicles that are a pretty common place in philanthropy. A lot of folks don't understand about remainder trusts and things of that sort. But these are great tools, and I think the more people understand those, the more they can find effective ways to be philanthropic.
Found in Massachusetts is that the way to increase giving is through donor education. That under the old paradigm, not very many people knew what philanthropy was. The word was never used. And they certainly did not know how they could plan their giving and strategize it. One of the innovations that I'm associated with is something called the Davlin Philanthropic Fund, which is a mutual fund in which it works just like any mutual fund. It gives a very good return on your investment, but a third of the management fees go to the charity of your choice. And younger people are interested in that. They can give to their colleges and, alma maters every year, regularly, simply on part of their management fees that they would be paying to any commercial for-profit. It was started by a very philanthropic guy, Bill Davlin, who basically could afford, because he'd made a lot of money on Wall Street, to forego part of his management fees. So the borderline between business and philanthropy is blurring. And businesses now are trying to figure out ways in which they can contribute to the public good while they're doing their for-profit business, as a part of their for-profit business. Google is a good example of that, where they have given their employees 1 day a week out of a 7-day, 24-hour-a-day workday to do something of their own interest. And they have done things of their own interest. It's very interesting. But that's a whole new development where the lines between for-profit and what used to be called nonprofit. One of the major changes is that we found that nonprofit is not philanthropy, that only 1 out of 10 nonprofits is philanthropy. So that word is going to go by the wayside, the word nonprofit.
Well, I think your chapters here of talking about all of these wonderful topics are educational, and,
Yes,
and
they are.
I hope we could look forward to more of these going forward. I think they're very worthwhile. And
Well, thank you, John. We're trying. We've got to try hard, because here in New England, giving lags behind the rest of the country. We are the wealthiest region in the country, and generally we're giving less. Nationwide, people give 4.7% of their disposable income to philanthropy. That's income after taxes, after mortgage, after food, necessary expenses. And this was a study that was published this last year. Here in Massachusetts, the average is 2.8%. In Dover and Sherburne, it's 3.7 for Dover and 3.8 for Sherburne. But if we could just come up to the national average for this third wealthiest state in the nation, we could materially improve our quality of life. And we did that once before in the late 90s, where we in 4 years doubled our charitable giving through donor education. So the idea is to create a climate in which everybody learns about philanthropy from school on. And it's all out there, ready to be taught, ready to be learned, and people will just naturally build philanthropy into their lifestyle. That's the goal. Now, whether that's where the new paradigm is going to come, we don't know yet. But what we're doing at the Catalog for Philanthropy is trying to set it up so that the new paradigm will know what philanthropy is, will present itself to the public persuasively in a compelling way, and engage more people in charitable giving.
great.
Well, our time is up. I want to thank you, John, for
A pleasure.
coming back again. We'll have to do more of these.
I look forward to it.
We've covered a fair amount of ground, and I think there's still a lot of ground to cover. But thank you for watching the program, and have a good day.